I spent 31 years apologizing to my family for things that were never my fault. One phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear finally broke the whole illusion open. I sat in my car for 2 hours afterward because I couldn't figure out how to go back inside. I'm writing this because I need someone outside of my bloodline to tell me I'm not losing my mind. I don't really know how to start this, so I'll just start. My name is Marcelo. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Harrahfield, a small town in upstate New York where everyone knows everyone and your family's reputation is basically a second skin you wear to the grocery store. I have spent the majority of my life believing, genuinely, deeply believing, that I was the reason my family wasn't closer. That I was the one who kept things difficult. That if I could just be different, more easygoing, less needy, better at letting things go, everything would smooth out, and we'd be the family I always wanted us to be. 3 weeks ago, I overheard a phone call between my mother and my aunt that dismantled that belief so completely and so suddenly that I didn't know what to do with my own body. I'm still not sure I do. But I'm writing this down because my therapist told me to try to get it outside of my head, and Reddit has always felt like the one place I can say a true thing without someone in my actual life twisting it into something else. So, here is the story of the DiPietro family, as honestly as I can tell it. There are 4 of us. Me, my older brother Nico, who is 35, and our parents, Loretta and Frank DiPietro. My dad, Frank, worked the floor at a tool and die shop in Canandaigua for 28 years. My mom, Loretta, worked part-time at the front desk of a chiropractic office and spent the other part of her time running the social infrastructure of our extended family, which is large and loud and mostly based within a 15-mile radius of Harrahfield. The DiPietros are a family that gets together for everything: birthdays, confirmations, graduations, random Sundays in July. There is always food. There is always noise. There is always someone telling a story in the kitchen. On paper, we were a close family. That was the thing. From the outside, from the cousin's perspective, from the neighbor's perspective, from the perspective of anyone who sat at our table and ate my grandmother Nana Seta's baked ziti, we looked warm. And in many ways we were. My parents aren't evil. I want to say that early, and mean it. They are not villains. But they had a dynamic between them that was, I understand now, deeply uneven. My dad deferred to my mother, in all things. My mother had a particular way of managing the family narrative, deciding what had happened, who was responsible, what the official version of events would be. And from very early on, I was cast in a specific role, the sensitive one, the dramatic one, the one who made things harder than they needed to be. Nico was not cast this way. Nico was funny and confident and athletic, and he handled conflict the way my mother preferred, by not having it, by shrugging things off, by performing a kind of effortless ease that I could never replicate no matter how hard I tried. Nico and I were never close, not really, even though I spent years reaching toward him. He had a way of making me feel slightly embarrassing to be around. Not cruelly, just distantly. Like I was always 2 steps behind some joke he and my parents were already in on. So, I tried harder. That's the thing I want you to understand about me. I am, by nature, a person who tries. I remembered birthdays. I drove home for Easter, even when I was exhausted. I called my mother every Sunday morning for 7 years without missing a single one. When there was tension in the family, and there was always tension, the specific kind that never gets named but crackles through every holiday like static, I was the one who tried to address it. I sent the careful texts. I initiated the uncomfortable conversations. I said, I feel like something is off between us, can we talk about it? I apologized for things I wasn't sure I'd done because the alternative, maintaining that I hadn't done anything wrong, felt selfish. Felt like more trouble than it was worth. Felt, honestly, like the kind of thing the difficult one in the family would do. The difficult one doesn't get to be right. The difficult one gets to be sorry. I had been sorry for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. For a long time I thought this was just family. I thought everyone had this. You love your family, you find them hard, you keep showing up anyway. Isn't that just what it means to have people? I had friends who described their families in ways that sounded rougher than mine, and I thought, well, at least we're not that. I had a therapist in my mid-20s, a gentle man named Dr. Alistair Fenn, who kept asking me questions about whose version of events I was accepting without examination. I wasn't ready to hear it. I thought he was trying to make me blame my parents, and I didn't want to do that. I stopped going after 4 months. I tell you all of this because I need you to understand how totally, sincerely, non-defensively I had accepted the story that I was the problem. This wasn't false modesty. I wasn't secretly sure I was right and performing self-doubt. I had looked at the evidence of my life. I was the one who always brought things up. I was the one who sent the long texts. I was the one who couldn't just let Sunday dinner be Sunday dinner. And I had concluded, this is on me. If I could just relax. If I could just stop needing so much. If I could just be more like Nico. 3 weeks ago, I drove back to Harefield for my dad's retirement party. Frank DiPietro, 28 years at the shop, finally hanging up the safety glasses. It was a big deal. My mom had rented the back room at Castellano's, the Italian restaurant on Route 5 that's been there since before I was born, and there were maybe 40 people there, cousins, neighbors, guys from the shop, Father Umberto from St. Anthony's. It was a genuinely nice night. My dad looked happy, in a way I don't always see him. I was glad I came. The party wound down around 9. Most people had left. I'd had 2 glasses of wine, and I was feeling okay, loose, warm, the specific contentment of a family event that had gone smoothly for once. I went to get my jacket from the coat room, which was a narrow hallway off the back of the main room, separated from the kitchen by a half wall. I wasn't trying to be quiet. I was just getting my jacket. My mother was in the kitchen on the phone. I heard her before I saw her. Her voice has a particular carrying quality, the kind that fills rooms without effort. She was talking to my Aunt Rosaria, her sister, who lives in Rochester. They talk constantly. I have always liked Rosaria. She's warmer than my mother in a way that I used to envy, and then learned to simply appreciate. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I want to be clear about that. I was reaching for my jacket on the hook, and then I heard my name, and the human brain does not let you unhear your own name, so I stopped. My mother was saying, Marcelo means well, Rosie, you know that. But he wants everything to be a conversation. He always has. You can't just have a nice dinner with him, there always has to be a whole discussion about feelings. And honestly, it exhausts Frank. It exhausts me. Nico just doesn't do that. Nico just shows up and has a good time. I don't know where Marcelo gets it from. I stood there with my jacket in my hands. Then my Aunt Rosaria said something. I couldn't hear her exact words, just the shape of them, quieter than my mother. And my mother laughed, a short dismissive sound, and said, No, I love him, obviously. I wish he'd stop trying so hard. It makes everything harder. I stopped trying so hard. The phrase landed in the middle of my chest like something dropped from a height. I got my jacket. I walked out the side exit. I got in my car. And I sat in the parking lot of Castellano's on Route 5 in Harefield, New York, for 2 hours and 10 minutes, while the last of the party filtered out past my windshield, and I tried to figure out what had just shifted inside me. Here is what I kept turning over, sitting in that car. For 31 years, I had believed that the tension in our family was caused by my trying too much, by my needing too much, by my inability to just be easy, the way Nico was easy. And I had responded to that belief by trying harder, sending more careful texts, having more of those uncomfortable conversations, bringing things up when everyone else preferred to let them sit. Because I thought, if I can just crack this, if I can just find the right approach, if I can just show them I'm worth the effort. But sitting in that car, I heard my mother's voice again. I wish he'd stop trying so hard. It makes everything harder. And for the first time in my life, the thought arrived fully formed and impossible to argue with. The trying was never the problem. The trying was the only thing I was ever doing right. The problem, the actual structural problem in the DiPietro family, was that the rest of them had decided long ago that trying wasn't something they were going to do. That talking about things wasn't something they were going to do. That the discomfort of honesty was simply not worth the cost. And they had looked at me, the one person who kept showing up at the door of that discomfort and knocking, and decided that the polite thing to do was label me the difficult one so they'd never have to answer. I had been apologizing to people for caring whether we were okay. For 31 years. I had been making myself smaller and easier and quieter to accommodate a family system that was never going to meet me in the middle, not because it couldn't, but because it had decided not to. And I had not just accepted that, I hadn't forced it. I had been my own warden. I wasn't a problem in my family. I was the only person trying to solve one. And the family had long since decided the problem didn't need solving, only managing. And I was the thing being managed. I went back inside eventually. Someone had noticed I was gone. My cousin Petra, who is 26 and perceptive in the way that the younger generation of a family often is, having observed the whole machinery from a slight distance. She found me in the parking lot, knocked on my car window. I told her I'd had some wine and needed air. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push it, which I was grateful for. I said goodbye to my parents. My mother hugged me and said it had been a good night. My dad shook my hand and then hugged me, the way he does when he's in a good mood. Nico was already gone, had an early drive back to Buffalo. Of course he did. Nico always has an early drive somewhere. Nico exits before the cleanup, exits before the goodbyes stretch too long, exits before anyone might feel anything. I drove back to my apartment in Albany that night instead of staying over. 2.5 hours. I didn't turn on music. I just drove and thought, and let the dark of the throughway hold me. I called Dr. Yawanda Okafor the next morning. She's a therapist I started seeing about a year ago, a Nigerian-American woman in her 50s who has an office near Washington Park in Albany and who has, in that year, asked me more precise questions about my family than anyone ever has. I had been circling certain things with her, describing the dynamic but always softening it, always adding, but I know I make it harder too, and I'm sure I'm not remembering it perfectly. She had been patient with the circling. She had not rushed me. I told her about the parking lot. I told her about the phone call. I told her what I'd sat with on the drive home. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How did it feel? Not what did you think. How did it feel?" I said, "It felt like getting out of a car you've been in for 30 years and realizing you were in the back seat the whole time and someone else was driving and you kept apologizing for the route." She wrote something down. She said, "That's a very clear image, Marcelo. I want you to stay with that." I have been staying with it. I haven't confronted my mother. I don't know if I will, at least not yet. I'm not ready to blow up my family over a parking lot epiphany, and I want to be honest about this, still afraid. Afraid of what happens when the difficult one stops being sorry. Afraid that the family I've been working so hard to hold together might just confirm what I now suspect, that my labor was invisible to them because they never asked for it, never valued it, never even noticed it as labor. They just noticed, when it arrived in the form of a difficult conversation, that it made them uncomfortable. And they called the discomfort Marcelo. But something has changed in my daily life, even in these 3 weeks. The Sunday phone call to my mother, I missed one last week. Not on purpose, not as a power move. I just woke up and thought, I don't want to call today, and so I didn't, and I waited to see what would happen. My mother texted at 2 p.m. "Everything okay?" "Not. I missed hearing from you." "Not. Just wanted to check in." "Just. Was there a problem? Was there an irregularity to be managed?" I texted back, "All good, just a busy morning." She sent a thumbs up emoji and didn't mention it again. I sat with that for a long time too. I want to say something to anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in it. Not the dramatic version. Not the version where your parents were monsters and you were a pure innocent. The quieter version. The version where your family loved you in the way they were capable of, which was genuinely and also insufficiently, and where the gap between what they gave and what you needed got filled, over years and decades, by your own self-blame. Where you became so fluent in the language of your own fault that you stopped noticing you were speaking it. I don't think my mother is a bad person. I think she is a woman who learned early that emotion is inconvenient, and that the most efficient way to handle an emotional child is to make the emotion the problem rather than the cause of the emotion. I think she passed that framework to Nico and he accepted it and I didn't, and she never once wondered if the framework was the issue. She just wondered what was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. I was trying to have a family. I was trying to be known by the people who were supposed to know me. I was trying to close a distance that they had decided was fine, and I had decided was not fine, and they had won that argument for 31 years simply by outnumbering me. I'm 31. I have a good life in Albany. I work as an environmental consultant. I have a close friend group. I have a girlfriend named Priya Mehta who loves me in a way I am only now letting myself fully receive, because I'm only now starting to believe I deserve it. I am not broken, but I've been carrying something heavy for a very long time under the impression that I had no one to put it down in front of, because the people who should have been willing to hold it with me had decided it wasn't theirs to carry. I am putting it down. Slowly. In my therapist's office on Washington Park. In my car in the parking lot of Castellanos on Route 5. And now here, with strangers on the internet who I somehow trust more than most of the people in my contact list. I was not the problem. I was the only one who knew there was one. And that, I think, is actually something to be proud of, even if it took me until 31 to see it that way.